Jayson Tatum isn't who he says he is. During the Celtics' previous series in Game 6 against the Sixers, Jayson Tatum had a pretty poor start to the game in the first 3 quarters. But in the 4th quarter, he absolutely went off and he won the Celtics that game and forced a Game 7. And after that great 4th quarter performance, Jayson Tatum in an interview said he was humbly one of the best players in the NBA.
Humbly, one of the best basketball players in the world. Go through struggles, go through slumps. It's a long game.
And he followed that up with a phenomenal performance in Game 7 as he put up over 50 points in that game and ended up winning the Celtics that series and moved on to the conference finals against the Heat. And going into that matchup against the Miami Heat, most people, I would say, thought the Celtics were going to win relatively easily and make it to the NBA Finals. But after dropping their first 2 games at home, Game 3 was an absolute must-win for Boston. But not only did the Celtics not win, but they ended up getting blown out by 30 points, which is absolutely unacceptable. And the same guy that said he was humbly one of the best players in the NBA in the previous series had an absolute atrocious game in that Game 3 performance and really in this series as a whole. But quickly before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. It's pretty clear that Jayson Tatum is one of the most talented players in the NBA. He's a true 3-level scorer out there. Like for example, from that 3-point range, Tatum has a really nice ability to hit that catch and shoot 3-point jump shot, cross over, sidestep, or even step back. And overall from that 3-point range, not only does he have a lot of different abilities, but he's also relatively efficient from that range as well. But moving on to his mid-range shooting, this is probably an even better aspect of Tatum's game. Tatum has a tremendous one-dribble pull-up. He also has a really nice crossover, sidestep, and step back, even a pretty nice catch and shoot mid-range jump shot, but probably the best ability of his mid-range game is his great post turnaround fadeaway. I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, but when you're a player, either a small forward or bigger, and you have a really good post turnaround fadeaway within your game, that just makes you so much more efficient and effective on the offensive end. Because in certain games where you're getting doubled or even triple teamed, or just in certain games where you have a really good defender on you, it becomes very difficult to score in a lot of different ways besides that. But if you have that post turnaround fadeaway to rely on, I just think it makes you such a better scorer. But moving on to his driving and finishing ability, Tatum also has a tremendous ability to do this as well. As he has really good athleticism, so he has the ability to pusherize players at times. He also does a really nice job at finishing layups around players, but also has a strength and athleticism it takes to finish through contact as well. Tatum also has nice floaters in the lane, and overall from top to bottom, Tatum is an absolutely elite scorer. Not only can he do all these different things, but he does everything very efficiently as well. And due to all the abilities that he does have, we've seen the results of that as his team in the Boston Celtics have had really good regular seasons for the past 4 or 5 years at this point. So at this point, it's pretty clear that Tatum has a talent level in order to be one of the best players in the NBA. So what's the problem? Why isn't he one of the best players in the NBA at this point? Well, the main reason for why I don't consider Tatum to be one of the best players in the NBA, at least at this current point, is due to lack of playoff success, specifically in the series versus the Heat. Now, when you look at all the best players in the NBA, what do they all have in common? Of course, they all have that ability, similar abilities to what Tatum has. Maybe you can even make the argument that Tatum is more talented than some of those guys, but one thing that all those players have in common is they always play very well in the playoffs. Now, some of these guys don't have the most team playoff success. Maybe they can't make it out of the second round, or maybe they can make it out of the third round, but all these players play extremely well in basically every single playoff game individually. And if their team loses a specific game, or if their team loses a specific series, it isn't necessarily their fault. The main issue would more so be the lack of help around that superstar player. But when you look at Jayson Tatum, he certainly has had a lot of success during these playoffs so far. He has had tremendous games, and especially that Game 7 performance was legendary, where he put up 50 points on the Sixers Sixers and ended up helping the Celtics win that series, but at the same time, there have been a handful of games during the playoffs so far, but especially in the series versus the Miami Heat, he's just not playing well at all, to be honest. In both games 1 and game 2, he didn't put up a single field goal in the fourth quarter in either of those games, which is just absolutely unacceptable. When you talk about the best player on your team in general, but especially when you talk about one of the better players in the NBA, that player has to perform very well in the clutch time, especially in the playoffs. That's why they're the best players in the NBA. But when you look at Tatum, the fact that he didn't play well in the clutch in game 1 or game 2, and even in game 3, which was an absolute must win, and his team in the Celtics basically lost by 30 plus points in that game, and Tatum himself put up a clunker, it's just not a great look for Tatum specifically, and it's difficult to call him one of the better players in the NBA when he has performances like that when it means the most. And obviously there's a bunch of different issues that the Celtics are dealing with at this point, but I think the main reason for why the Celtics are down 0-3 is due to their best player in Jayson Tatum. Tatum needs to step up. In both games 1 and games 2, they were relatively close, and if Tatum was able to play relatively well in the fourth quarter, I think the Celtics would have won at least one of those games and maybe even both. I think Tatum is that good and that talented in order to lead his team to victories. I think we've seen it in the past during these playoffs, but in the series against the Miami Heat, he just hasn't been able to do it, and due to that, I don't think I can consider him to be one of the better players in the NBA, because when I personally think about the best players in the NBA, I see those guys performing the best in the clutch time and performing the best in the playoffs. And if you're not able to do that, I think it's hard for me to recognize you as being that. Because although Tatum has done really well in the playoffs in other series like the Sixers series, for example, or other series prior to that, at this point, this is really where it matters the most, in the Eastern Conference Finals against a team that you probably should beat. Now, obviously the Miami Heat are significantly better than everybody, including myself, thought going into the playoffs, and even going into the series, I thought the Celtics were the better team, but at this point, it's pretty clear that the Heat are actually the better team. But either way, I do think Tatum really needed to play better, and if he did, I still honestly believe that the Celtics could be up 2-1 or they could be down 2-1, but either way, at least they would still be in the series. But at this point, being down 0-3, the series is basically a wrap. Now, although this series basically is a wrap, the bright side for Jayson Tatum and the Boston Celtics is Tatum still is very young, and he still has a ton of more time to have more experience in the playoffs and hopefully eventually turn into one of the best players in the NBA based on his playoff performances and play very well consistently. Because in my opinion, as I mentioned a bunch of times in this video, I think it's pretty clear that Tatum has a talent in order to be one of the best players in the NBA. He just needs to show it consistently in the playoffs and especially in the clutch time in specific games where it matters the most. And I personally think Tatum is eventually going to get to that point. I just think he has too much talent to not get to that point, but it's just going to take some more time and some more experience in the playoffs. And overall, I do think, although he didn't play well in the series versus the Heat, I do think this could be a pretty good learning experience for him, and maybe he'll be a better player for it. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening with Jayson Tatum and the Boston Celtics. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you still think Jayson Tatum is one of the best players in the NBA, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out, guys.